Last week, Airtable announced a pretty sweeping round of layoffs that impacted almost 20% of their current staff. So what does this mean for no code? What does this mean for Airtable? Well, in this video, I'm going to be breaking it down as best I can. So if that's of interest, stick around and let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Gareth and I own Gap Consulting. We make it our mission to help you get organized and automated with no-code tools. And at the forefront of that for years has been Airtable. Well, in this particular video, we have got to talk about this sweeping round of layoffs that is impacting a large chunk of the former Airtable employee staff. But before we get into that, I want to welcome you to join me for my Airtable crash course. If you're new to using Airtable, if this is the first time you've experienced Airtable, it would really help you to at least get a foundational basic knowledge of Airtable out of the way. And we are going to teach you that foundation in my Airtable crash course. You can sign up for that at garethpronovost.com/airtable-crash-course. Go ahead and swap your email in there and you are going to get those lessons directly to your inbox so that you can start understanding how Airtable works and get more productive within it. But without further ado, let's hop into the heart of the video. And this has a different tone from our usual videos. Usually I am excited to just get out here and talk about some cool new thing that we're building in Airtable. But today it's a little bit more melancholy because we have bad news to discuss. It's this round of layoffs that has impacted Airtable. So at last count, Airtable was somewhere in the 1,200 to 1,500 range, I think, for employees. And they have announced about 250 of those employees have been laid off with this latest round of tech layoffs. I found this news to be a little bit surprising because we didn't really think that Airtable was vulnerable in that way. At least I didn't when it came to all the layoffs that have been impacting tech here in late 2022. And of course, the big reason for a lot of these layoffs is that some companies are preparing or hedging against what they think is going to be a pretty turbulent year in 2023. So they're trying to realign their strategy and their balance sheet with that pending difficult year. So I was surprised that this impacted Airtable. We look at Airtable as being in a hyper growth part of its life cycle right now. It's not fully adopted across all different industries, and it is a tool that can help so many people. And so it's a little surprising to think that in the beginning of its life cycle, still early days, it is making such a strong pivot and laying off 20%. That's not a small amount. 1 out of every 5 employees at Airtable got bad news this last week. So first and foremost, if you want to find anything out about this layoff, I would suggest just checking out Google search. There's a bunch of different information out there from different articles that have talked about this from different perspectives. But the one I really want to dive into here is from TechCrunch. So looking at TechCrunch here, this is the article that came out, I think, on December 8th. And it's saying that Airtable had a little bit of bad timing when they announced this for a number of reasons. Number one, they had just finished publishing a memo or a blog talking about how laid-off workers can use Airtable to search for jobs. So then it's really bad timing to then a couple of days later come out and say, oh, by the way, part of our workforce at Airtable is now impacted by that. This is really hitting close to home, especially for us here at Gap, because a lot of the folks who were impacted by this layoff are folks that we had been emailing with on a consistent basis for years now, given that we work so closely with this tool. So a lot of friends of ours lost their jobs as well, unfortunately. But you see here the official announcement: 254 employees across development, engineering, and a little asterisk here, other teams. So the company spokesperson says that Airtable is continuing to hire. So they're still in a hire mode for strategically important roles, which would then infer that the 20% that they laid off are in strategically unimportant roles. Now, this is coinciding with the fact that there was also a big announcement here that says that 3 of the C-suite at Airtable were let go. And this is one of those things that hits close to home. 2 of these people I was friendly with and have a good relationship with the chief revenue officer, the chief people officer, and to me, most surprisingly, the chief product officer have all opted to part ways with the company as well. So this announcement coincided with the 20% layoff that Airtable also announced. Now, this is really surprising because the chief product officer especially was incredibly passionate about the direction that Airtable was going. Peter Dang, I think, had been with Airtable from inception. So to lose not only 3 people from C-suite, but also to have the chief product officer who had been there for so long, who was very passionate alongside the CEO about the direction of where this product was going. This is a really interesting piece of news to get, especially coupled with the layoffs. Now, the other part of this that is incredibly bad timing, of course, is the holidays. So here we are. These layoffs were announced on or around December 8th, and it's really just 2 weeks before Christmas and the rest of the holiday season. So that's really bad timing. As someone who's been laid off myself in a previous position, I can attest to the fact that there's really not a good time to get laid off, but it's got to sting a whole heck of a lot more when it comes in early December, right before the holidays. So there's a lot about this that doesn't sit great with a lot of us in and around the no-code space, but let's keep going and see if we can glean any more information out of this particular article. So one thing I want to highlight is that they've talked about the fact that they have rapidly expanded execution on multiple fronts. And at the time, I'm guessing that that time was 2020, 2021, when tech was booming. So at that time, they believed that they could successfully pursue all of these different fronts in parallel. And this comes directly from Howie Liu's email to Airtable. But then, of course, however, in taking a hard look at the efforts in the current market environment, we've identified the team's best position to capture the opportunity in enterprise in order to bring complete focus, alignment, and accountability in our execution. So what are we really getting at here? It sounds like what is being said is that the change in focus in Airtable is to focus much more narrowly upon the enterprise market. And this is an interesting perspective because so many of us, so many of you watching this channel are coming at this from a small to medium business perspective. And yes, Airtable is an incredible tool for enterprise clients as well, but I really sincerely hope that they're not cutting off their nose to spite their face here. Yes, obviously, the majority of their revenue is going to come from the enterprise segment, as is so true with so many softwares. But if you recall, Airtable's mission from the beginning has been to democratize software. And here we are looking at a company that is claiming that their mission is to democratize software and then saying, but we're going to stop focusing so much on the little guy. And we're going to focus entirely on the big companies because that's where we get paid. And while that's not inherently wrong, and from a business strategy perspective makes a ton of sense, what kind of message is that sending to people who are running small to medium businesses and struggling to figure out how Airtable may or may not help them reach their goals? If the true goal of Airtable is to democratize software, don't we need to bring that software to everyone, specifically to the masses and the folks who don't have the means to pay million-dollar contracts for enterprise licenses? I would argue that to truly democratize software, it really means putting it in the hands of everyone in the world. And how are you going to get there if you're looking at specifically narrowing your focus to enterprise clients? So again, this is another part of this layoff announcement that just doesn't sit great with me, and it does bring me some pause and some concern about what the future of Airtable looks like within the no-code space. Obviously, there are plenty of other players in the no-code space who will happily gobble up the opportunity to appeal to the small, medium business. But given that Airtable was my first love in software in no-code, I really hate to watch them make a decision that could blow up in their face. I'm hopeful that I'm wrong here and that in fact their approach to appealing to enterprise only bolsters their overall balance sheet at the end of the day. But right now, it does feel a little bit tenuous. Now, if we keep reading in this article, we're going to look at Airtable's cash position. So in an article back in 2021, when Airtable was first announcing the fact that they'd raised a $735 million Series F round, which, by the way, that was an incredible moment. I believe at that time they were valued at around $11 or $12 billion, which is fantastic, an incredible accomplishment. Well, at that time, they mentioned that they were looking to just really bolster their capitalization so that they could remain well-funded amid any downturn. And so at that time, the CEO, Howie Liu, mentioned that we have more than enough runway to get to profitability and then some. And so this was said in an interview. And here's an important note. They are a private company still, right? Airtable is still held privately. And so he also mentioned in that interview, we're not under the gun to show short-term results of profitability. So we're very, very fortunate to not be under such pressure, and we would never gloat about that, but I do think it gives us a unique position to hire talent. So back in 2021, not too long ago, Howie Liu was saying, hey, we got this extra money because we want to hire great talent so that we can continue to remain competitive, bolster our competitive advantage going into the next couple years. And now here we are just a couple short years later, and we've seen an about face on this policy. So a lot of hiring, and just kidding, not the right time for that talent, and maybe we got a little too overzealous in the way that we were expanding. And listen, I don't mean to come down on Airtable C-Suite. A huge amount of responsibility rests on the shoulders of C-Suite in any organization. And sometimes we make the wrong decision. Sometimes we make a decision and we don't have perfect information, so we go in a certain direction and we have to course correct. That is natural. And so for all businesses, we see an ebb and flow, a boom and bust cycle. And that is a perfectly normal thing. It's just a little stunning that this boom and bust is coming in such short sequence. 2021, we have a lot of money. We're going to hire a lot of people. 2022, not so much, and we're not really sure about the future. So that happened in a really quick time frame, and again, brings a certain level of unease to those of us watching from the outside. Now, continuing on that front, one thing I do want to point out is that Airtable still says that they are continuing to be well capitalized, but they have slightly shifted in tone by adding that being a lean organization becomes doubly important in times of economic uncertainty. So again, we're getting a little bit of a mixed message here. On one hand, Airtable's saying, we're incredibly well capitalized, we can weather any storm. And then on the other hand, they're saying, but we need to feel a little bit leaner because we're heading into uncertain economic times and we really don't know what's going to happen there. And so I feel like we're getting, again, a little bit of a mixed message, and I'm not really sure how to interpret that because either you're well capitalized or you're not. And in this case, Airtable, as I mentioned, is a privately held company, and so it does, again, give us a little pause to read an announcement like this because we don't really know what their balance sheet looks like. We don't really know what is happening on the inside of Airtable. So if I were to put on my financial analyst hat, it would be very difficult for me to get any kind of read on how Airtable is doing without actually looking at the numbers, which none of us have access to outside of Airtable. So what does this all mean in the long run? Well, it's not excellent news for the no-code community. It definitely means that there are things that Airtable was doing that they have now decided maybe aren't the right strategies to implement. And yes, as is true for so many of us and so many different organizations, there is a risk for uncertain economic times ahead, and we do want to tighten our belts maybe just a little bit, but there are definitely ways to do that that don't include laying off 20% of the workforce, especially given that so many of them were newer hires to Airtable in general. But listen, before we close out this video, I want to sign off with a message of positivity. And really, it comes from my own personal experience having been laid off. So this is really a message to anyone who's been impacted either directly or indirectly inside of the layoffs that have impacted Airtable or any of the other tech companies. So my personal story came back from 2018 when I was laid off from my financial analyst position completely unexpectedly. And as I mentioned earlier, there's never a great time for a layoff. So I was laid off in a period where I was freshly engaged and looking forward to getting married. The wedding was not going to be all that cheap, as they never are. I'd also just purchased a house with my fiance, and we had a mortgage. And so for the first time ever, I had my first house payment on top of planning for a wedding, and that's when I got the layoff news right before my birthday. Talk about bad timing. That was not the best of birthdays. But listen, at the end of the day, I looked at that as an opportunity for growth. And so the way that we interpret the world and the way that we interpret stimulus, both negative and positive, that impacts our lives can alter how we position ourselves moving forward. And so rather than getting upset, throwing a tantrum, and cursing a lot of people out, which I definitely considered doing, but instead of doing that, I went out, found a contract position so that I could work part-time while I figured out my next move. And my next move wound up being the best thing that ever happened to my career. And the reason that you're watching this video right now, because I started my YouTube channel and subsequently started Gap Consulting. So I hope that this message serves as a reminder to anybody who's been negatively impacted by this, that you control your own destiny. And maybe the fact that a company laid you off is actually a blessing in disguise, as it was for me, because it might be the nudge that you needed to get out and do something that you would not have done otherwise. Maybe that thing that you've been thinking about forever, or that you've talked about for so long saying, I would love to do that, but you never actually took the leap because your time was absorbed, your effort was absorbed somewhere else. If that was a place like Airtable and you're now free to go your own direction, I fully believe that you can execute on that vision. And if there's anything I can do to help any of our friends out there who are negatively impacted by this, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. That's it for this video, folks. I know it was a bit different from our normal one, but if you want to stay up on top of no-code news like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in the next one. As always, I hope you found this to be extremely helpful. If you did and you'd like to learn more, swing by our website to see how we can help. We offer an exclusive free training that teaches the fundamentals of no-code tools, including automation. We also have some paid services available, including advanced courses, no-code hourly consulting, as well as custom project consulting. So swing on by to get the help you need, and we look forward to connecting with you soon.